Everyone thought I was just another quiet guest at my daughter's wedding. A widow, dressed modestly, smiling politely. No one knew the secret I carried, a secret worth $33 million. For years, I kept it hidden, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because the world doesn't take kindly to a wealthy widow, and some people will stop at nothing to get their hands on what isn't theirs. I thought this day would be about love, laughter, and family. I thought I could sit quietly, watch my daughter marry the man she loved, and enjoy a peaceful celebration. But peace is a dangerous illusion when greed is lurking in the shadows. Little did I know, by staying silent, I had become the target of schemes I could never have imagined. Schemes that would test my courage, my patience, and force me to fight back in ways even I didn't think I was capable of. This is the story of betrayal, manipulation, and a widow who refused to be a victim. And it all began on a day that was supposed to be about happiness, but turned into a battle for justice. Before we get started, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and become part of our family here at Revenge Unfolded. More stories, more revelations, more healing. Always. They seated me at table 2. Wedged behind a flower arrangement so massive it could have hidden a small car. I smiled, sweetly, keeping my thoughts to myself. Nathan had no idea the storm he'd walked into. 3 days later, he'd be standing on my doorstep with papers that would have me laughing for hours. That morning had started with optimism. I had picked my outfit like a master chess player, plotting the first move. A soft gray dress, whispering, "Harmless widow," paired with my grandmother's pearls, enough dignity to avoid looking pitiful. My hair, done at Martha's salon, was tidy, simple, respectable. No extravagance, just enough polish to blend in. "Mom, you look acceptable," Claire said as she passed, distracted by the wedding coordinator's latest panic. Acceptable? A polite participation ribbon? In human form? I watched Claire drift down the aisle in her great-grandmother's lace, a fragile thread of family history kept alive. She was radiant, glowing with that kind of bride energy that temporarily makes everyone forget their own problems. As guests trickled in, the social landscape became obvious. Nathan's parents arrived like visiting royalty. Margaret, adorned in enough diamonds to require insurance on her own head, glided through the crowd, air-kissing the powerful, ignoring me entirely, as if I were part of the furniture. "Excuse me," I said to the frazzled usher, showing my seating card. "I think there's been a delightful mistake here." "Table 2, ma'am, just behind the decorative feature." Decorative feature. How polite. I made my way to the exile behind enough blooms to stock a florist for a week. Hibiscus and baby's breath surrounded me, leaving me a view of nothing. Absolutely nothing. From my botanical prison, I observed the festivities through a large mirror. There I was, Eleanor Bennett, 72 years of experience, tucked in a corner like yesterday's newspaper. The ceremony itself was lovely. Claire floated down the aisle, and Nathan looked sharp in his tailored suit. But during cocktail hour, I noticed Nathan's different smiles. There was the megawatt grin for the wealthy,
the practiced politeness for those who could offer favors, and the thin, indifferent line for anyone likely to request assistance rather than provide opportunity. He approached me then, that perfectly charming expression plastered on his face, the one people wear when they're about to manipulate. "Isn't this wonderful?" he said, gesturing to the reception as if he'd personally arranged the sunset. "You must be over the moon with pride." "Oh, I'm practically vibrating," I replied, syrupy sweet, laced with just enough venom to make it interesting. He either missed the bite in my tone or decided to ignore it, like the politician he clearly admired. I was hoping we could have some quality time soon, really get to know each other. "How refreshing," I murmured, smiling like I was in on the joke. Most people manage that before marrying into a family, but I admire your chronological approach. I caught a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Subtle, tiny, but there. I had it. I was thinking dinner this week, just us. Some fascinating ideas about family collaboration. "Family collaboration," I echoed, savoring the ominous undertone. "Well, I do love a good mystery dinner. Thursday? Perfect. Somewhere private? Exactly." I wondered, under my breath, if he meant discussions about my stamp collection, bridge club scandals, or my weekly grocery budget. Exciting stuff. As he drifted away, charming someone more useful, I caught my reflection again. A silver-haired widow, modest clothes, sitting alone behind enough flowers to stock a botanical garden, a coupon shopper, heating bill worrier, the image I had meticulously crafted for 2 years. During the father-daughter dance, I slipped into the marble ladies' room. I powdered my nose, practiced my innocent elderly widow expression. Harmless. Harmless. Invisible. When I returned, Nathan was working his charm on the Hendersons, elderly associates of Henry's old firm. They were eating up his attention like it was wedding cake. "Really looking forward to Thursday," he said, eyes glinting. "So am I, dear. So am I," I replied, my tone carefully bland. As the Claire tossed her bouquet and the evening wound down, I watched Nathan move through the room, each interaction calculated. He had plans. Elaborate plans. Too bad he had underestimated the one thing he couldn't see. 72 years of experience. And this widow was about to become very dangerous. The honeymoon period lasted exactly 48 hours before the real story began. Claire called daily, each conversation a symphony of marital bliss. "He's so thoughtful, Mom. Always planning ahead for our future, our security." Security. The word hung in the air, a warning bell I couldn't ignore. Oh, as a husband should think about money constantly, especially when it's not his own? What do you mean? "Oh, nothing, sweetheart. Just that financial planning is very romantic." Claire didn't notice the sarcasm. Probably best she didn't. Wednesday crawled like a dentist's drill.
I spent Thursday morning immersed in the thrilling life of a widow, dusting Henry's leather-bound books, snipping spent roses, and rehearsing in my mind what Nathan might want to discuss over what I assumed would be outrageously expensive wine. By Thursday evening, the excitement of anticipation hit me with the subtlety of a tax audit. I dressed for my role, a modest black dress that suggested dignity without wealth,
Mother's pearls around my neck, and Henry's broken watch on my wrist, still dignified enough from a polite distance. The restaurant Nathan had chosen was one of those places where even water gets a French accent, and the waitstaff regards you as personally responsible for their artistic disappointments. Nathan was already seated, every inch the polished young executive, his smile rehearsed and practiced. "Eleanor," he said, rising as if gravity itself couldn't hold him down, "you look absolutely radiant tonight." "Thank you, Nathan. This place is something," I replied, the subtle undertone of my words like a soft warning bell. Something indeed, enough to make one question if paying for dinner also required an IQ test. We ordered wine. He insisted on a bottle with a name so long it could have been a small paragraph. He swirled the deep red with the care of a sommelier who thought the world was watching, and then leaned in as though the conversation were about to become a delicate dance. "How are you managing on your own?" he asked, all concern and charm. "Oh, brilliantly. 72 years of experience make most trouble seem minor." "Of course, but it must get overwhelming. That large home, all those decisions," he said, dynamite disguised as a casual question. Robert, or Henry as I now called him in memory, had always joked I carried enough opinions for 3 people, so naturally I kept myself amused. Nathan laughed, that polished boardroom laugh that probably secured investors and intimidated elderly widows alike. "Yes, yes, but honestly, don't you worry about practical matters? Money, legal issues, people who might take advantage of your generosity?" Ah, there it was. The real subject masked as courtesy and served with expensive wine. "Should I be concerned about anyone in particular, Nathan?" I asked, pretending curiosity. "Not exactly concern, more like preparation. You know how tricky things can get for someone in your unique situation." "My unique situation? A widow, as if it were some rare medical condition? And what situation is that exactly?" I asked, letting the words drip with gentle skepticism. He leaned closer, the confidential tone of men revealing secrets to little women. "Well, living alone, making major decisions without guidance, being vulnerable to people who might not have your best interests at heart. Vulnerable to people like him, I suppose." "How considerate of you," I said, letting the sarcasm float through the air. "I've been consulting with my attorney for safeguards for people in situations like mine." "Safeguards? How very forward-thinking. What sort of protection are we talking about?" With the flourish of a magician, Nathan produced a manila folder from his jacket. He placed it gently on the table as though presenting the Holy Grail itself. "Just some routine paperwork, nothing dramatic, purely to make sure you're covered in case of important decisions." I opened it with the enthusiasm of someone holding a live snake. Powers of attorney, financial oversight, medical decision authority, complete control dressed up as concern. "This is thorough. My lawyer specializes in elder care. He's handled cases like this? Like mine," I added with a small smirk. Apparently, I was a case study. How delightful. "And Claire thinks it's wonderful. Really, Eleanor, we just want to make sure you're protected from anyone who might take advantage of your trusting nature." "My trusting nature?" I arched an eyebrow. He had done his homework. "Protected from whom exactly?" "Oh, dishonest contractors, questionable advisors, relatives who might suddenly become very interested in your welfare." Naturally, he combed and filed. "Relatives who might suddenly become very interested. I almost laughed. Thick irony, rich enough to serve for dessert. How prescient of you, I said, keeping my voice calm while my mind reeled. Just common sense, easier to arrange before complications appear. Complications like me keeping control of my own life. I see, and this must be handled promptly because timing matters. The longer you wait, the more questions about your capacity might arise. Capacity. He was already laying the groundwork to declare me incompetent. Well, I said, closing the folder slowly, hands atop it like a blessing. This requires careful consideration. Relief lit his face. Of course, take all the time you need, though my attorney suggests prompt action. I replied before a single thought could escape caution. I'll want to review this with my own legal counsel. His smile faltered for a heartbeat. Your own lawyer? Yes, I need someone to translate it into terms my simple mind can understand. Eleanor, really, we should finalize tonight. Efficient handling works best. I countered smoothly. I'm sure your notary would agree that important decisions shouldn't be rushed. The notary? You did bring one, didn't you? You seem prepared for everything else. The mask slipped entirely. How did you know? Lucky guess. You strike me as a planner. Nathan studied me like a predator gauging a puzzle he couldn't solve. Finally, he said, Of course, take your time. But his eyes betrayed impatience. He was done playing games. Too bad for him, the harmless widow was just beginning hers. The weekend passed under a deceptive calm. Nathan's impatience crackled over phone lines like static. Claire called twice, casually inquiring about the helpful paperwork Nathan had so thoughtfully shown me. Still thinking it over, sweetheart. He's just trying to help, I said, voice calm, masking the storm behind my eyes. Enjoying the story? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens next.
Mom, he knows so much about legal stuff, Claire said, her voice tinged with awe. Legal stuff. For someone like Nathan, elder exploitation was just another box to tick on a resume of charming conquests. Monday arrived with a call that confirmed every suspicion I had about my perfect son-in-law. Eleanor, it's Nathan. I hope you've had a chance to think about our discussion. Oh, Nathan, I've barely been able to think about anything else, I replied, letting my tone stay sweet yet edged with steel. Excellent. I was hoping we could meet again this week. I have additional information that might help clarify things. Additional information? I asked, masking the thrill of anticipation. More polished lies, no doubt. How considerate. Same restaurant? Actually, I thought somewhere more private. Maybe your home. I can bring documents that are easier to review in a comfortable setting. Ah, the trap of privacy. My home. No witnesses. Perfect for exerting pressure. What kind of documents? I asked innocently. Just examples of how similar arrangements have helped other families. Case studies, success stories, if you will. Success stories about elderly people giving up their independence to charming predators. How utterly fascinating, I murmured, letting the sarcasm roll off my tongue. Wednesday evening? He asked. Perfect, I said. 7 o'clock. Wednesday could not come fast enough. The days in between I spent in my element, observing, planning, preparing. If Nathan thought he was stepping into my home for a casual negotiation, he was in for a rude awakening. The game would be mine and mine alone. By Wednesday evening, I was ready for battle. Simple gray dress, minimal jewelry,
perfect for a woman about to spring a very expensive trap. Nathan arrived at precisely 7, briefcase in hand, smile polished to perfection. "Eleanor, thank you for agreeing to meet here. I know this situation can feel overwhelming." "Oh, not at all. In fact, I'm finding it quite educational," I replied, calm and measured, masking the storm gathering behind my eyes. He settled into my living room with the confidence of a man who thought he owned the place, spreading papers across the coffee table with practiced efficiency. "I brought case studies, families who've benefited from these arrangements. You'll find them reassuring." "How thoughtful. But before we dive into other people's stories, I have questions about your story." "My story?" He blinked. "Yes, your background, your qualifications for managing other people's lives." His confident expression faltered, just a fraction, but enough for me to notice. "Well, I have extensive business experience," he said cautiously. "In what field?" "Investment management." "Primarily for which firm?" "I work independently now. Before that, various positions in financial services." "Various positions. How delightfully vague." "How long have you been advising elderly clients about financial decisions?" "I wouldn't call it advising." "Exactly. More like protective planning. And how many elderly clients have you actually protected?" "A few," he said, the confidence draining slowly. "Families who requested guidance?" I prodded. "Guidance they needed or guidance I suggested they needed?" he added, stumbling slightly. The room fell silent, the tick of my grandmother's clock punctuating the tension. "Nathan, I think there might be a misunderstanding about my intentions," he ventured. "Oh, I understand your intentions perfectly. What I'm curious about is your methods," I countered smoothly. "My methods?" he asked, wary now. "Your methods for identifying vulnerable targets, gaining trust, and convincing them to sign away rights." I let each word land like a hammer. "I would never." "Never what, Nathan?" "Never target elderly widows. Never manipulate them under false concern. Never steal their independence disguised as protection," he stammered, his mask cracking like old paint. "You're making serious accusations," he said, trying to regain control. "I'm making serious observations about a serious predator who made a serious mistake," I said, evenly, voice calm but cutting. "What mistake?" I smiled, steel hidden behind polite gray hair. The same widow he thought helpless, completely unprepared? "Nathan, I think you're confused," he said, voice trembling. "I'm not confused at all. I know exactly what you're trying to do. The question is, do you know what I'm about to do?" "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the recording of this conversation. I'm talking about the private investigator documenting your activities. I'm talking about the attorney preparing criminal charges." Color drained from his face, his carefully cultivated confidence evaporating. "You can't prove anything," he hissed. "I can prove everything. Your financial struggles, your debts, your long history of targeting elderly women, all of it." "That's impossible." "Is it?" "Tell me, Nathan, how much do you owe in gambling debts?" He froze. "How do you know about that?" "I know everything about you, including the fact that you're not the first man who tried to separate me from my assets." "Not the first?" he muttered, panic creeping in. "Yes, But this time I was ready. Ready how? I stood, voice dropping to a whisper that could cut glass. Ready to destroy anyone who tries to steal what my husband spent 40 years building. You don't understand. I'm desperate. You need to leave, now, before I call the police. Nathan, please, we can work this out. The only thing we're working out is whether you leave voluntarily or in handcuffs. He scrambled, papers shaking, his grand plan collapsing like a house of cards in a storm. This isn't over, he muttered. Yes, I said, thinking of Henry's secrets waiting below in the basement. It is. After he left, I poured myself a glass of Henry's best wine, savoring the quiet. Tomorrow, I would finally descend to the basement, open the old safe, and discover the arsenal of tools my husband had left. Tonight, I relished the look of panic in Nathan's eyes, proof that some predators learn too late that prey can have sharper teeth. Thursday morning, I stood atop the basement stairs, key in hand, heart hammering with anticipation and dread. For 2 years I had avoided this moment, grief holding me back, but Nathan's visit had given me a reason to confront it. The basement smelled of old paper and lingering cologne. Henry's desk was untouched, crossword puzzles, coffee-stained coasters, glasses resting as if waiting for him to return. Behind a cleverly disguised panel, the safe waited. Inside, documents made my hands tremble, accounts I had never known, decades of investments, legal papers establishing trusts and protections. At the bottom, a letter in Henry's familiar handwriting, the contents of which would change everything. Has something like this happened to you? Share your experience below. I want to hear your story.
I sank into Henry's old chair, letter in trembling hands. The numbers danced before my eyes. $33 million. $33 million, fully protected, completely mine. More wealth than I could ever dream of spending in 10 lifetimes. The letter continued. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and someone is trying to exploit your generous heart. I'm sorry I never told you about our fortune. $33 million, properly safeguarded and entirely yours. I lived modestly so we could leave behind a secure legacy, and I hid our wealth to shield you from predators, exactly the kind who would lead you to this safe. A small envelope fell from the letter. Inside was a business card. Carol Peterson. According to Henry's instructions, she had managed everything since he fell ill and knew exactly how to protect me from threats like Nathan. I dialed immediately. Carol Peterson, law office. This is Eleanor Hartley. Mrs. Hartley, I've been expecting your call for 2 years. Can you come in today? How soon? How about right now? Her office was nothing like the stuffy, intimidating place I had imagined. Bright, modern, sprinkled with family photos amid certificates and law degrees. Carol Peterson herself was younger than I expected, probably in her early 50s, with eyes that missed nothing and a handshake that could crush walnuts. Please sit down. Henry told me this day might come, she said, spreading documents across her desk. Trust papers, decades of investment records, legal protections. What day? I asked, curiosity sharpening my tone. The day someone would try to manipulate you into surrendering your rights, she said matter-of-factly. I leaned in. But the assets, they're not modest, are they? No, not at all. $33 million, held in an irrevocable trust. You have complete control. No one else can touch a penny, not even if they somehow gained power of attorney. Henry set it up specifically to protect you from manipulative types like Nathan. I sank back in the chair, finally seeing clearly what Henry had been building all these years. Marcus, or Nathan as I now called him in my head,
couldn't access a single dollar, and now I had the means to make sure he never tried again. What exactly does that mean? I asked. Carol's eyes glinted with something sharp, almost predatory. It means we're going to dismantle him so thoroughly he spends the rest of his life warning other predators about underestimating widows. How? Criminal charges for attempted fraud, civil suits for damages, and a full audit of every financial transaction he's made in the past 5 years. Legal? I asked, trying to suppress a laugh. Completely. When someone tries to fraud you, we trace the money, where it came from, where it went, who else is involved. We expose the entire operation. Operation? Oh, yes. Men like Nathan don't act alone. There's a whole network of predators targeting elderly victims. We'll find them all. I thought of Claire, her tears when she described his debts, the careful manipulation Nathan had used on both of us. And my daughter's marriage? I asked, voice catching slightly. That's up to her, Carol said, but she'll make that choice with complete information instead of lies. The money remains entirely under your control. You can live exactly as before or buy a yacht tomorrow. Your choice. I gathered the trust documents in my hands, feeling like I held lightning itself. When do we start? I asked. We already started. The moment you walked into my office, Nathan became the hunted, not the hunter. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about Henry's letter. He had anticipated this, prepared me, armed me for a war I didn't know was coming. More than anything, he had given me permission to win. That evening, Claire called. Mom, Nathan seems upset about something. He won't tell me what happened with you. We had a fascinating discussion about his plans for my future, I said lightly. What plans? The kind that assume I'm too naive to protect myself. Sweetheart, there are things about your father, about our finances, about our family you don't yet understand. Tomorrow you'll see the truth. What truth? The truth about what your father left me, and the truth about what I'll do to anyone who tries to take it. Her silence on the other end was deafening. Mom, you're scaring me, she whispered. Good. About time someone in this family learned to be scared, I replied with quiet satisfaction. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, holding Henry's letter, imagining $33 million at my disposal and the war it would wage. Nathan thought he was hunting a helpless widow. He had no idea he was stepping into the lair of a very wealthy, very angry dragon. And dragons don't negotiate with thieves, they burn them alive. Friday morning, Carol called with more promise of professional retribution. I found a prosecutor specializing in elder fraud, she said. She wants to meet with you today. How soon? This afternoon. She's very interested in Nathan's case. Why? Because she believes he's part of a larger network. If we prove it, we can take down the entire operation. The meeting was set in the district attorney's office. There I met Sarah Chen, a razor-sharp prosecutor who looked like she devoured insurance fraud cases for breakfast. Mrs. Hartley, tell me everything about your son-in-law's tactics. And so I did. Every conversation, every manipulation, every carefully constructed lie Nathan had spun for Claire and me. Classic pattern, Sarah muttered, jotting notes with a focused intensity.
Sitting across from Sarah Chen in the district attorney's office, I could feel the gravity of the moment settling over me like a weightless cloak of inevitability. This was no longer about a charming young man trying to impress my daughter. This was about deliberate manipulation, deception, and the kind of predatory thinking that left unsuspecting widows vulnerable. Mrs. Hartley, walk me through his tactics, Sarah prompted, pen poised, eyes sharp and attentive. I took a deep breath and began. Every detail poured out. Nathan's practiced politeness, the seemingly benign conversations about financial planning,
The way he subtly planted seeds of doubt about my judgment, the careful orchestration of his charm, even Claire's blissful ignorance had been part of the setup. Sarah nodded as I spoke, scribbling notes with precise efficiency. Classic pattern. He's methodical, uses emotional manipulation, the illusion of helpfulness, and preys on trust. We see this often with elder fraud cases. I let that sink in for a moment. Elder fraud? That phrase used to feel distant, abstract. Now it had a face. A man sitting in a posh restaurant pretending to be concerned while trying to strip me of everything Henry and I had built. Sarah leaned back and fixed me with an appraising look. We'll need documentation. Every conversation, every paper he tried to get you to sign, anything that shows intent. It'll form the backbone of the criminal case. I've got it all, I said, my voice calm but tinged with anticipation. Everything's been recorded, everything logged. I wasn't going to let a charming predator rewrite my life story. Good, she said, eyes glinting. This isn't just about Nathan. Our investigation will look at the network. He's likely connected to others, people who use the same tactics, prey on the same vulnerabilities. We can take down more than just one man. The weight of that statement made my pulse quicken. I pictured him now, thinking he'd cornered a naive widow. Instead, he was about to discover that he'd stumbled into a meticulously planned counterattack. Mrs. Hartley, do you realize how significant this is? The funds, your position, your cooperation. It's the perfect storm. Nathan won't know what hit him, and neither will the rest of his network. I allowed myself a small smile, tinged with satisfaction. It's been a long time coming. Henry always said preparedness was the best weapon. He never imagined I'd be using it this way, but it feels right. Sarah nodded. We'll coordinate with Carol Peterson. She'll handle the trusts and financial side, making sure every asset is legally protected. I'll handle criminal prosecution. And with your cooperation, we can trace every step Nathan has taken, every paper trail he's left behind. The idea that I was holding a key to justice, that Henry's foresight and my vigilance could dismantle a criminal operation sent a shiver through me. It was empowering in a way I hadn't felt since Henry's passing, a mix of fear, anticipation, and exhilaration. Eleanor, Sarah said softly, leaning in, you understand that this isn't just revenge. This is about protection, prevention, and reclaiming what's yours. And it's legal. Every step we take is by the book. Nathan won't see it coming. I nodded, feeling the fire of resolve ignite. I understand. Let's make sure he regrets ever thinking he could take what Henry spent 40 years building. Sarah allowed a small smile. Perfect. We'll begin immediately. I want you to gather everything, notes, emails, recordings, documents. Carol will ensure the trusts are airtight. Together, we'll build a case that's unassailable. Driving home, I replayed every moment with Nathan in my mind. The arrogance, the condescension, the belief that he could outwit a 72-year-old widow. Little did he know I had not only anticipated him, I had prepared an army of legal, financial, and investigative support that would make him wish he had never walked into our lives. That evening, Claire called again. Mom, Nathan seems frantic. He won't tell me what's going on. Sweetheart, he's discovered he picked the wrong woman to manipulate, I said, carefully measured. Tomorrow, you'll see the truth about what your father left me and what happens to anyone who tries to take it. Mom, you're scaring me, Claire whispered. Good. Time someone learned to be scared. The words were crisp, unyielding. This was not a threat. It was inevitability. After hanging up, I settled into my armchair, Henry's letter and the trust documents before me. $33 million, perfectly shielded, and the promise of justice coursing through every plan Carol and Sarah had outlined. Nathan had no idea. Not a clue. And dragons? Dragons never negotiate with thieves. They incinerate them. Every calculated word, every sly manipulation, every small smile Nathan had used to charm his way into our lives, it all became clear. He wasn't simply misguided or overzealous. He was a professional predator, methodical and patient. His ultimate plan? To confine me to a nursing home, seize everything Henry had built, and convince everyone I was too frail or forgetful to resist. "But he loves me," Claire had whispered, hope threading her voice. "He loves what he thought you could give him," I said gently, placing the financial records Carol had uncovered on the kitchen table. The gambling debts, the sham business ventures, the pattern of targeting widows, everything lined up perfectly. "There's a difference between love and opportunism. You're married to a professional predator." Her face shifted as she absorbed the evidence. Denial, anger, heartbreak, each emotion flickering like candlelight. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked, voice trembling. "Whatever you choose, but you'll act with complete knowledge, not under manipulation or lies." Tuesday arrived with Nathan's father, a pompous man with fire in his eyes and entitlement in every word. "Eleanor," he began, voice thick with accusation, "you've destroyed my son's life over some misunderstanding." "I've exposed his criminal behavior," I said evenly. "There's a difference." "He was only trying to help you," he said, incredulity masking his shame. "He was trying to rob me," I corrected, letting the weight of the recordings speak for themselves. "This is vindictive, cruel," he sputtered. "This is justice," I said, crisp as winter air. "Your son chose to prey on vulnerable women. Now he's facing the consequences." Wednesday brought Nathan's bail hearing. He tried to paint himself as a concerned family member, a victim of paranoia. The judge was unimpressed. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, voice firm, "the evidence shows a systematic attempt to defraud an elderly family member. Bail is set at $500,000. $500,000 Nathan didn't have. He would remain in jail until trial." Thursday brought a visit from Carol with updates that made even morning coffee taste sweeter. "The FBI is now involved," she said, a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. "Nathan is potentially linked to a multi-state elder fraud network." "How extensive?" "Dozens of victims, millions in stolen assets. If they flip Nathan, we can dismantle the entire operation." "Will he cooperate?" "That depends on how much time he faces. 20 years in federal prison tends to make people very talkative." 20 years. By the time Nathan emerged, he'd be middle-aged, his reputation in ruins, every opportunity for a fresh start gone. Friday brought Claire's decision. She filed for divorce, citing emotional fraud and irreconcilable differences. "I can't stay married to someone who tried to rob my mother," she told her lawyer. "What about the house, the lifestyle, the security he offered? All built on borrowed money and deception. I want nothing from that life." She moved back nearby, renting an apartment close to mine. The experience had changed her, made her cautious, wary, empowered. "I feel so stupid," she admitted one evening as we sat on the porch. "You trusted someone you loved. That's human, not stupid," I said. "Professional manipulators are trained to exploit that trust. You weren't naive, you were human." "How did you know?" she asked, curiosity mixed with awe. "I didn't at first, but Henry left resources for situations exactly like this. tools to fight back when someone tried to steal what he spent decades building. What kind of resources? I smiled, letting her imagine the weight of those hidden defenses, the kind that turns seemingly helpless widows into very dangerous adversaries. Mom, exactly how much money did Dad leave you? Enough to make anyone who tried, a fool, regret it, I said, calm and confident. The trial began that September. Nathan's lawyer tried every angle: diminished capacity, entrapment, familial misunderstanding. None worked. The evidence was overwhelming, the recordings damning. Patterns of elder fraud were undeniable. When the jury heard Nathan plotting to control my assets, his own lawyer winced. 47 minutes later, the verdict came back: guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge's contempt was palpable. "Mr. Thorne," he said, voice cold as steel, "you systematically exploited the trust of vulnerable adults, destroyed their independence, and stole their life savings. 18 years in federal prison. May it serve as a warning to others who consider preying on the defenseless." 18 years. Nathan would be 55 when he got out, with every opportunity lost and every freedom curtailed. As they led him away, hatred flared in his eyes. "This isn't over, old woman." I smiled, sweetly, icily. "Yes, Nathan, it is." Afterward, Carol and I celebrated at the same restaurant where Nathan had first tried to ensnare me. "You've become somewhat legendary in elder law circles," she said, raising her glass. "How so?" I asked. "You fought back and won. You've inspired victims to come forward, families to question suspicious relatives, and set a new standard for self-protection." "Good," I said. "No one should endure what Nathan attempted. What's next for you?" "Next," Carol smirked, "we ensure predators like him never find another victim." "And I have the means to do it," I said, thinking of Henry's foresight and the $33 million in my control. That night, back in my kitchen, I read Henry's letter one final time. He knew this day would come, had prepared me for it, and given me the weapons to win a war I didn't even know existed. Some widows bite back. Some bites are fatal. Nathan Thorne had learned that lesson too late. The following Tuesday, the aftermath arrived at my door in human form. Patricia, Nathan's in-law door, dripping in false dignity, her jewels shouting wealth she no longer commanded. "Eleanor, we need to discuss this unfortunate situation." "Come in, Patricia," I replied smoothly. "I was wondering when you'd appear." She swept into the living room as if the world still owed her deference, but I could see the cracks. The mask of superiority barely concealed desperation.
The designer clothes were impeccably pressed, though their style belonged to another decade. Patricia, Nathan's mother-in-law, walked in with an air of authority she no longer earned, her expression a careful mask of concern. "This vendetta against Nathan has gone too far," she said, voice clipped. "Vendetta?" I echoed, arching a brow. "Is that what we're calling prosecuting criminals these days?" "He made a mistake. People don't deserve their lives ruined over one lapse in judgment," she insisted. "One lapse?" I said, letting the words cut like ice. "Patricia, your son systematically targeted vulnerable elderly women for years. This wasn't a mistake. This was a business model." Her composure faltered, the mask slipping. "The family is suffering because of your actions," she said, voice tight, trembling slightly despite herself.
The family is suffering because of Nathan's crimes, I replied evenly. We've lost time, peace of mind, and social trust. The house, the business, the reputation, they're all casualties of his choices. And yet here you are, worried not for the victims, but for how it looks. She shifted, unease flickering in her eyes. You don't understand. We have obligations, commitments. You had obligations to raise a son who wouldn't prey on defenseless people. How did that work out? Patricia's composure cracked fully, a moment of human fragility peeking through the veneer. What do you want from us? I said. Nothing, I said firmly. Justice has already been served. You've been spared any further damage simply because I choose it. There must be something, she pressed, desperation thinly veiled. Money? A public apology? Surely we can work something out. I studied her, letting the silence stretch, tasting the fear behind her eyes. Then my words dropped deliberately. Actually, there is something you can do. Hope flickered briefly, a spark in her otherwise calculating gaze. What? Disappear. Move far away. Change your name. Make absolutely certain that no member of your family ever targets another vulnerable person. That's unreasonable, she whispered, shock lacing her tone. Prison is unreasonable. Poverty is unreasonable. Losing independence to a predator is unreasonable. My request is perfectly reasonable, I said, measured and absolute. Patricia left without another word, dignity in tatters, her jewels a hollow echo of authority. By Wednesday, Nathan's former business partner arrived, a sleazy man named Richard, who had coordinated much of the elder fraud network. Mrs. Hartley, we could be useful allies, he offered, trying to charm his way in. I doubt that very much, I said, cold. I have names, amounts, methods, information that could help recover losses. He pressed. In exchange for what? I asked, amused by taste. By hell, I was put under the Federal Protection Program. I laughed aloud, genuinely. Richard, I don't negotiate with criminals. I destroy them. You're making a mistake, he said, flustered. We could help. You could be valuable inmates, I replied, letting the words sting, which coincidentally is exactly what's about to happen. I called Carol immediately. By Friday, Richard was under federal investigation, exposed for his role in the fraud network. The following week became a parade of Nathan's associates, real estate agents who helped launder stolen funds, lawyers who prepared fraudulent documents, even bank employees who moved illicit assets. One by one, I referred them all to Carol and the FBI, letting the law run its unyielding course. You're building quite a reputation, Carol remarked during one of our strategy sessions. Word is spreading, I said. Targeting me was Nathan's fatal mistake. Fear is an excellent deterrent, Carol said with a sly smile. The federal prosecutor believes your case will redefine elder fraud prosecutions. How so? I asked. Typically, they catch one or two people and call it a victory. Your case gives them access to an entire criminal network. And the victims? I asked, thinking of the dozens Nathan had deceived. 37 confirmed so far, with more coming forward every week. Total damages over $12 million. $12 million, stolen from people who trusted the wrong person. Can we get their money back? Most of it, Carol said. Federal asset forfeiture laws favor recovery when criminal enterprises are involved. And Nathan's assets? Being liquidated, house, cars, jewelry, everything, distributed among the victims, including you. You weren't financially harmed since you never signed the papers. Then my share goes to the other victims, I said simply. Mrs. Hartley, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, Carol noted. I can spare it. That evening, Claire came over for dinner, brighter and more confident than she had been in months. The divorce is final, she said, a mix of relief and apprehension in her voice. How do you feel? Free, terrified. But free, I said, prompting her. Terrified of making the same mistake again, of trusting the wrong person. Claire, what Nathan did wasn't your fault. But I brought him into our lives. You acted with full knowledge, choosing justice over convenience. That takes courage. Did it ever occur to you that you might be in danger? That Nathan's associates could retaliate? I smiled, thinking of the security measures Carol had implemented, the law enforcement connections, and the very public nature of our victory. Let them try. I am not the helpless widow they think I am. No, you're definitely not, Claire agreed. As she left, I reflected on how much had changed since Nathan first appeared under the guise of concern. 6 months ago, I had hidden my resources, played the modest widow, kept my head down. Now I was someone whose calls were returned immediately, whose concerns commanded respect, and whose enemies ended up behind bars. More importantly, I had become someone who mattered to those who needed protection. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. Carol's voice buzzed with excitement. Eleanor, we just got a major break. Nathan is cooperating. What's he revealing? I asked, intrigued. Everything. Names, methods, accounts. The entire elder fraud network is about to collapse. And in exchange, a reduced sentence. He'll still serve significant time, but not the full 18 years. I pictured Nathan in his cell, finally learning that every action carries consequences, that predators can become prey. How much time? I asked. 8 to 10 years with good behavior. 8 years, I said, satisfied. He'll be in his 40s, marked by a federal conviction, and everyone will know what he did. That's acceptable. There is one more thing, Carol continued. The federal prosecutor wants to interview you about establishing a victim advocacy program. What kind of program? Training for law enforcement, resources for victims, legal support for prosecutions. They want to use your case as a blueprint. I smiled, thinking of Henry's foresight. Not only had he armed me to protect myself, but he had given me the tools to safeguard others. Set up the meeting, I said, steady. As I hung up, it hit me. Nathan had tried to steal my independence and instead handed me purpose. Some mistakes are costly. Some are transformative. His mistake had given me the mission, the means, and the justification to become a formidable force. Justice, I realized, has a delicious sense of irony. The federal prosecutor's office was unlike any local law enforcement agency I'd ever encountered. Sterile yet commanding, precise yet intimidating, with a hum of power that made every decision feel weighty. Agent Sarah Torres greeted me with the sort of respect usually reserved for major political donors or high-profile witnesses. Mrs. Carter, your case has become our gold standard for elder fraud prosecution, she said, voice firm yet deferential. How so? I asked, leaning forward. Most victims are too embarrassed, too intimidated, or simply too isolated to fight back effectively. You didn't just fight back, you dismantled an entire criminal network. I had resources, and I used them strategically. That's exactly what we want to study, she said, spreading folders across the conference table. Photographs, financial records, organizational charts tracing Nathan's network. 39 victims across 6 states, each averaging $300,000 in losses. Total damages approaching $15 million. $15 million stolen from elderly people who trusted the wrong people. The scale of it made my chest tighten. And the other victims? I asked. Most lost their independence, savings, and confidence in their own judgment. Several were forced into nursing homes. 3 died while their assets were systematically drained. 3 people died while being robbed. The words hit like a physical blow, a reminder that justice was never just financial. It was life and death. "What can we do for them?" I asked, my voice catching. "For the deceased, nothing. For the living, everything, if you're willing to help." "What kind of help?" Agent Torres opened a thick folder labeled Victim Advocacy Initiative. "We want to create a nationwide program to do for other victims what you did for yourself. Legal resources, financial safeguards, and full support for criminal prosecutions." "Funded how?" "Combination of federal grants, asset forfeiture, and private donations." "Private donations?" I asked, incredulous. She was essentially asking me to bankroll nationwide justice for elder fraud victims. Initial startup is about $2 million, ongoing operations roughly $5 million annually. $5 million a year? A significant chunk of Henry's trust, but nowhere near enough to compromise my security. "And in exchange?" I asked, a hint of steel in my voice. "In exchange, we systematically dismantle every elder fraud operation in the country," she said with unflinching certainty. I thought of the 3 victims who had died while being robbed, of countless others who had lost their life savings. "Where do I sign?" I asked. The paperwork took 3 hours. By the time we finished, I had become the primary funding source for what was now the most comprehensive elder fraud prosecution initiative in federal history. "Mrs. Carter, you do realize you've just declared war on a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry," Agent Torres said, awe and caution in her voice. "Good," I said with a small smile. "Wars keep life interesting." That evening, Claire and I celebrated over dinner at the same restaurant where Nathan had first tried to manipulate me. "Mom, are you sure about spending this much money on strangers?" she asked, concern knitting her brow. "They're not strangers. They're people targeted by predators like your ex-husband. And $5 million a year is less than our investment returns. Henry built this wealth to protect people. Now I'm finally using it as he intended. If it doesn't work, we'll build a better program. Money only has value when it's put to meaningful use." Claire raised her glass. "To making predators pay, to making them extinct." The program launched 3 months later with results that exceeded expectations. Within the first week, investigations opened in 12 states. By the end of the first month, 17 arrests had been made of people connected to elder fraud networks. But the most satisfying call came one Tuesday morning from Agent Torres herself. "Mrs. Carter, we just arrested Nathan's former mentor. The man who taught him how to prey on elderly women. He's been running these schemes for 20 years. Your program gave us the resources to build a case against him." "His name?" I asked, suppressing a chill. "William Thorne, Nathan's uncle." The family business was literally a criminal enterprise, stealing from the most vulnerable for decades. "How many victims?" I asked, heart pounding. "Over 100, dating back to the 1990s. He systematically destroyed lives for decades, and now he's facing life without parole. Federal charges alone will keep him locked up until he dies. Life in prison for preying on elderly people. Finally, punishment matched the crime." "There's more," Agent Torres continued. "He's willing to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Names, methods, locations of other networks nationwide." "And you're considering this?" "Yes. His intel could help dismantle elder fraud operations across 30 states. I thought of justice versus revenge, of protecting future victims versus punishing past crimes. Take the deal, but make sure he serves significant time, at least 15 years even with cooperation." 15 years. William Thorne would be 80 when he got out, if he lived that long. Acceptable. The information he provided was devastating to elder fraud networks nationwide. Within 6 months, the program facilitated arrests in 23 states. Criminal organizations that had preyed on elderly victims for decades collapsed like fragile houses of cards. "You've become the most feared person in elder fraud circles," Carol said during one of our meetings. "They warn each other now," I said with a satisfied smile. "Nobody wants another Eleanor Carter situation." "What's a Eleanor Carter situation?" Carol asked, laughing. "Complete destruction of the criminal enterprise, federal prosecution, and asset forfeiture, leaving them bankrupt." "Perfect," Carol said. "Fear is the best deterrent." "There's even talk of naming the federal elder fraud statute after me." "The Hartley Act?" I asked. They also joked about calling it the Don't Mess with Widows Act, but maybe too informal. I said, thinking of Henry. He'd be proud. That evening, I sat in my garden reading the latest program reports. 1 year in, we had recovered over $40 million for fraud victims, sent dozens of predators to prison, and created a protective network spanning the country. More importantly, the message was clear. Elderly people were no longer easy targets. The phone rang, breaking my reflection. Clara's excited voice came through. "Mom, turn on the news, Channel 7. I grabbed the remote. The reporter stood outside the federal courthouse announcing a stunning development. Authorities had arrested the entire leadership of what is being called the largest elder fraud network in U.S. history.
The evening air was crisp as I sat in my garden, reviewing the latest reports from the advocacy program. 1 year in, we had recovered over $40 million for victims, dismantled dozens of predator operations, and built a protective network stretching coast to coast. The most important victory wasn't just in numbers. It was the message. Elderly individuals were no longer easy prey. Predators had learned that the era of passive victims was over. The phone rang, shattering the calm. Claire's excited voice echoed through the receiver. "Mom, turn on Channel 7. You need to see this." I grabbed the remote and switched on the local news. Outside the federal courthouse, reporters buzzed with energy. Authorities had arrested the entire leadership of what was now officially being called the largest elder fraud network in U.S. history. "Mom, are you watching?" Claire asked again, urgency in her voice. "I'm watching," I said, my pulse quickening. "How does it feel?" I thought of Nathan, locked away in a federal cell, William Thorne facing life in prison, the hundreds of victims finally poised to reclaim their lives. "It feels like your father's trust is being used exactly as he intended," I said, voice steady. "And how's bad?" Claire pressed. "To turn seemingly powerless widows into formidable protectors against those who prey on the vulnerable." I hung up, a smile tugging at my lips. Nathan had made the most expensive mistake in elder fraud history. He had underestimated a widow armed not only with resources, but with strategy, foresight, and a will to protect. But more than revenge, he had awakened in me a determination I hadn't known existed, the absolute need to safeguard those who couldn't defend themselves. Henry had left me $33 million to stay safe. I transformed it into something far greater, protection for thousands. Some legacies transcend money. This one was priceless. 2 years later, I found myself in the kitchen reading a letter that made my morning coffee taste like victory. It was from Patricia Hoffman, an elderly teacher and one of Nathan's earliest victims. "Dear Eleanor, I wanted you to know I got my house back. The Federal Asset Recovery Program returned everything Nathan stole from me, plus damages. But more than that, I regained my confidence. I'm no longer afraid to trust my own judgment or make my own decisions. Thank you for showing me we don't have to remain victims." Her letter was one of dozens arriving weekly, each one a testament to lives restored, independence reclaimed, and dignity returned. Each one reinforced why Henry's trust had been used correctly, not for luxury, but for justice and protection. The doorbell rang, pulling me from reflection. I opened it to find Agent Torres holding a bottle of champagne and wearing the widest grin I'd seen since Nathan's conviction.
"Eleanor, we need to celebrate," she said, stepping into my kitchen. "What are we celebrating?" I asked, curiosity piqued. "The complete dismantling of the elder fraud network that started with your case," she said, spreading newspaper clippings and federal reports across the cable like trophies. Final numbers: 67 arrests, 49 convictions, and over $80 million recovered for victims. $80 million returned to elderly Americans who had been robbed by cunning predators. "And Nathan's associates?" I asked. "All convicted. Richard got 12 years. The complicit lawyers were disbarred and sentenced. Even the bank employees who facilitated laundering are facing federal charges." "And the victims?" 93% recovered their assets. The remaining 7% received compensation from the fund you established. 93%, I whispered. "Almost everyone." "And Nathan himself?" "Still in federal prison, cooperating with investigations, facing the consequences of choices that destroyed dozens of lives." I poured 2 cups of coffee, thinking back to the chain of events that had started with a humiliating seating arrangement at Claire's wedding. "Any regrets?" asked Agent Torres. "Mrs. Carter, your case transformed how federal law enforcement approaches elder fraud," she said, eye serious. "Before you, these crimes were treated as isolated incidents. Now they're recognized as organized criminal enterprises, requiring comprehensive, coordinated response. Nathan had inadvertently created the most effective elder protection program in modern history." I laughed, savoring the irony. He picked the wrong widow, wrong victim, wrong family, wrong crime, wrong decade. Everything about his plan had been catastrophically wrong. And now, his name had become synonymous with failure in criminal circles. Networks whispered warnings: never target a widow like Eleanor Carter. "What's next for the program?" I asked. "Expansion, training local law enforcement in 20 more states, establishing victim advocacy centers in major cities, and developing early warning systems to identify potential targets before predators strike." "Funded how?" "Self-sustaining. Asset forfeiture from convicted criminals ensures the program runs indefinitely. Your initial investment created a permanent protective system." Self-sustaining. Henry's trust had created nationwide security for the vulnerable. "Any new threats?" I asked. "Always. But now we hunt them proactively instead of waiting for victims to report crimes." After Agent Torres left, I called Carol to share the triumph. Carol's, buzzing with excitement. "Eleanor, the federal prosecutor's office just called. They want to nominate you for a presidential award for public service." "What kind of award?" I asked, eyebrows raised. "The Medal of Freedom, for your contributions to elder protection and criminal justice." "The Medal of Freedom? The nation's highest civilian honor? That seems excessive for protecting myself from my daughter's ex-husband," I said, amused. "Not when it created a program that shielded thousands of elderly Americans from financial predators." Carol replied,
I thought about Henry's letter, the trust he'd placed in me, and the battle fund he'd carefully designed for situations exactly like this. Every dollar, every resource had been calculated to empower me against predators who thought they could exploit widows with charm and deceit. "Will accepting the award require public appearances?" I asked Carol, already sensing the answer. "Probably," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "White House ceremony, media interviews, speeches, you'll be front and center." "If my visibility helps other victims find the courage to fight back, it's worth the exposure," I replied firmly. "There's one more thing," Carol added. "They want Claire to attend." "Why her?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because your daughter's courage in choosing justice over convenient lies is part of what made this program possible," Carol explained. Claire's bravery had transformed her loss into empowerment.
She had lost a husband, but gained clarity, the knowledge that truth and justice outweighed comfort and illusion. "I'll ask her," I said, already imagining her pride. "Eleanor, can I tell you something personal?" Carol's voice softened. "Of course." I started practicing elder law 20 years ago, never imagining a day when predators would genuinely fear their potential victims. You changed the entire dynamic. "Henry's foresight changed the dynamic," I said modestly. "Money is only a tool. You wielded it as a weapon for justice," she said. I hung up, reflecting on the strange irony. Nathan had tried to strip me of independence, but instead had handed me purpose. He had intended to make me helpless, yet he had unknowingly forged a force that would protect thousands. My power, funded by Henry's trust and driven by a commitment to shield the vulnerable, was now permanent, unstoppable, and highly consequential. The Medal of Freedom ceremony was 6 months away. 6 months to strategize how to use this platform to terrify predators even further, and to ensure victims everywhere realized they could fight back. Those 6 months promised to be intense, deliberate, and transformative. October arrived with crisp clarity. Emma and I took our seats in the East Room of the White House. Surrounded by artists, scientists, civil rights champions, and one widow who had unintentionally ignited a national movement against elder fraud. "Mrs. Eleanor Carter," the president announced, "for extraordinary contributions to criminal justice and elder protection, demonstrating that ordinary citizens can achieve extraordinary results when they refuse to accept injustice." Walking to the podium, I thought of Nathan, confined and powerless, watching the broadcast, finally grasping the scale of his catastrophic mistake. "Thank you, Mr. President. 2 years ago, I was a widow, striving to live quietly, to avoid conflict. I learned one vital lesson: trouble does not respect politeness." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. When someone tried to steal my independence under the guise of care, I discovered the ultimate defense against predators by becoming a more dangerous force than they could imagine. Thunderous applause followed. This medal does not belong to me alone. It belongs to every elderly person who has been told they are too old to decide for themselves, too weak to protect their own interests, too vulnerable to demand justice. I looked directly into the cameras, delivering a message that would echo nationwide. To anyone preying on elderly individuals, we are watching. We are organized, well-funded, and relentless. Consider finding another line of work. The standing ovation lasted for 3 minutes. Every cheer reinforced that we had shifted the balance of power. Afterwards, Emma and I celebrated at the hotel bar, surrounded by Secret Service officers and fellow honorees. "Mom," she said, eyebrows raised, "did you just threaten criminals on national television?" "I promised consequences," I said with a sly smile. "There's a difference," she countered. The president looked impressed. "Good. It secures further support for our program," I added. "What's next?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Next, we expand internationally. Elder fraud isn't confined to our borders, so our response shouldn't be either." Media coverage exploded. Within a week, I had appeared on every major news network, spoken to international outlets, and participated in 3 documentary projects. Every statement carried a single, unwavering message. Elderly Americans are no longer easy targets, and anyone attempting to exploit them will face systematic dismantlement. The reaction was immediate. Law enforcement agencies from 12 countries requested collaboration and guidance on elder fraud cases. But the most satisfying call came from Agent Torres. "Eleanor, unprecedented results," she said. "What's happened?" I asked. Reports of elder fraud nationally have dropped 60%, not because fewer crimes are occurring, but because fewer people are daring to commit them. Fear is the best deterrent, I thought. "It's more than fear," she continued. "Criminal networks now recognize the unacceptable risk of targeting elderly people. Federal prosecution, asset forfeiture, and, most of all, the threat of a Carter-style response have made them hesitate." "What kind of risk?" "Legal destruction, financial ruin, and public exposure. Predators are learning to fear the possibility of a situation like yours." I had become a living warning. Nathan's attempt to exploit me had transformed me into the predator's worst nightmare. Personal threats? None credible. Smart criminals understood the consequences of attacking me. Those who weren't smart, they would learn the hard way. Some targets fight back with unlimited resources, and I was one of them. That evening, I sat in my garden, reading letters from victims whose lives had been restored. Teachers received their pensions. Veterans recovered their disability benefits. Widows regained independence. Each note reaffirmed that Henry's trust had been used exactly as intended, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The phone rang again. Carol's voice was electric. "Eleanor, Congress wants hearings on elder fraud prevention. They want you to testify." "About what specifically?" I asked. "Creating a permanent federal program based on your model. They're considering legislation to classify elder fraud as a federal crime with life imprisonment penalties." Life imprisonment for stealing from the elderly. Justice finally matched the crime. "When do they want me?" I asked. "Next month. Full Senate hearing, national television coverage, Committee on Aging." "Perfect. Time to solidify the program permanently." Carol paused before adding almost casually, "One more thing. Nathan's parole hearing is scheduled the same week. 5 years served. A predator released into a world that now knew what happens when widows fight back." 5 years served. Nathan would soon walk free into a world that knew precisely what happens when widows refuse to be victims. The thought alone was enough to make the hairs on my arms rise. I had not only survived his schemes, I had reshaped the rules entirely. The week of his parole coincided with my congressional testimony. I arrived at the Capitol, briefcase in hand, prepared to deliver not just words, but a blueprint for nationwide elder protection. Reporters crowded the hallways, cameras clicking, microphones poised. But I didn't flinch. This wasn't about fame. It was about justice, deterrence, and survival for thousands of vulnerable people. In the hearing room, senators, representatives, and a panel of federal law enforcement officials watched as I unfolded charts, statistics, and first-hand accounts from victims across the country. I spoke clearly, deliberately, my voice carrying the weight of experience. "Elder fraud is not victimless," I began. "It destroys independence, confidence, and lives. But it can be stopped if we act strategically, decisively, and without compromise. The model we implemented provides legal resources, financial recovery, and swift prosecution. More importantly, it empowers victims to recognize manipulation before it escalates. Questions came from all sides, probing legality, funding, sustainability. I answered each with confidence, citing recovery statistics, arrests, and international collaboration. By the end of the session, even the most skeptical senators nodded in recognition of the program's impact. That evening, the parole board decision was released publicly. Nathan's application was denied. His criminal record, combined with the national attention and federal oversight, made his reintegration politically and legally untenable. He would remain confined, his freedom indefinitely suspended. Justice, at last, had aligned with consequence. Back home, Emma and I sat in the garden, a glass of wine between us, the fading sunlight casting long shadows over the grass. "I can't believe how far we've come," Emma whispered, "from a wedding seating to national reform." "It wasn't luck," I replied. "It was preparation, foresight, and courage. Your father's trust gave me the tools, but it was our choice to wield them." Our program continued to grow. Within months, additional states adopted our advocacy framework, creating regional offices to monitor potential elder fraud. Law enforcement agencies were trained to spot early warning signs, and international networks sought guidance for similar programs abroad. Letters kept arriving. Teachers, veterans, widows, retirees, all sharing stories of regained independence, restored finances, and newfound confidence. One note stood out, penned by a woman who had been Nathan's first target. "Eleanor, I once felt powerless, afraid to make decisions for myself. Today, I am free. Your fight became my fight, and your courage reminded me that I am never too old to protect myself." Tears blurred my vision as I set the letter down. This was more than money, more than accolades. It was a legacy. A life transformed not by revenge, but by decisive, righteous action. Carol's calls continued, brimming with updates, new arrests, recovered assets, programs expanding into cities previously unprotected. The nation was finally waking up to a truth I had long known. When elderly people fight back, predators lose. And yet, my journey didn't end there. International collaborations were underway. Fraud rings in Europe, Asia, and South America had been mapped, monitored, and disrupted. Conferences, webinars, and global law enforcement training sessions became part of my regular schedule. Eleanor Carter, the quiet widow of yesterday, had become a global force for elder protection. One evening, standing on the porch with Emma, I looked out over the city lights, reflecting on the improbable path from vulnerability to authority, from fear to influence. "Mom," Emma said softly, "do you ever think about Nathan?" "I do," I admitted, but not with anger. He's a cautionary tale now, a reminder of what happens when you underestimate someone who refuses to be a victim. "And the program?" she asked. "Permanent, sustainable, expanding, and unyielding. Funded, staffed, and vigilant. Every predator who considers targeting the elderly knows they'll face consequences, swift, total, and undeniable. Some lessons are expensive, but some, like this one, are priceless." The wind whispered through the trees as if in agreement. For the first time in years, the house felt complete, not just safe, but purposeful. Henry had prepared me for a battle I didn't know I'd fight. Nathan had inadvertently handed me the opportunity to redefine elder protection. And through every challenge, every letter, every victory, I had learned that power, when combined with conscience and strategy, is unstoppable. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift. The world had changed. The vulnerable were no longer defenseless. Predators had been warned, and justice finally had claimed its due. Eleanor Carter had survived, transformed, and triumphed, and in doing so, she had ensured that no widow, no retiree, no vulnerable individual would ever face a predator alone again. Some battles are personal, some battles are universal. This one was both, and it ended exactly as it should have, with power restored, justice served, and the future secured.